The Auto Union racing car. Its first public appearance was just as sensational as a new trademark. 4 interlocking rings, symbolic of the Olympics, a programmatic expression of sporting ambitions. The Auto Union was created in 1932 from the 4 marques native of German Saxony: Audi, DKW, Horsch and Wanderer. The headquarters of the new company were located in Chemnitz, but most of the cars with the 4 rings on the radiator grille were built in Zwickau. The racing department was established in the Horsch works, and its employees were ideally prepared for this new task, thanks to their experience in handling 8-cylinder engines and the high-quality standards required for this work. "20 mechanics were responsible for the engine, 6 for the gearboxes and axles, and 12 for the chassis. 20 metalsmiths alone were needed for the bodywork and other sheet metal work. This was not surprising, because the aluminium bodies of the silver arrows were all handmade. All parts, including cylinder liners, the engine block, and the main engine bearings, were machined in the Horsch series production plant. In particular, the high-strength steel-root superchargers required a great deal of intricate rework. The racing car was designed by Ferdinand Porsche. His concept called for a 4.4-litre engine, its displacement being distributed over a large number of small units to give a V-type 16-cylinder arrangement. The ignition mixture was injected into the engine through a supercharger. Each cylinder was to have 1 inlet valve and 1 outlet valve. All 32 valves were controlled by a central camshaft. In the first engine, a single-piece crankshaft was still used. However, the vibration and elasticity problems could not be solved with the required length and loading. A decision was therefore taken to gear the individual crankshaft segments and screw them together. Porsche had realized that the key problem with the new formula, 750 kilograms maximum permissible weight without tires, fuel and water, was not so much the increase in performance, but more the translation of these powerful forces into acceleration and speed while attaining good road holding. This prompted him to shift the center of gravity to the rear in his design and position the engine and gearbox behind the driver. Between 1939 and 1941, when all development work was suspended, Auto Union's expenditure on the development, design, construction and deployment of racing cars for Grand Prix racing was exactly 14,188,460 Reichsmarks. That was a great deal of money, not only in the circumstances prevailing at the time. However, this figure did not even amount to 1% of turnover. I believe, however, that the contribution made by Motorsport to the production cars was insignificant. And I know from Herr Abraham Eberhorst that this was also not even intended. In my opinion, the very opposite is true. It was the high standards attained in the mass production of cars which made it possible to successfully develop and race a top-notch product of automotive technology, as the Auto Union racing car was in its heyday. The elasticity of the engine during a test conducted by test engineer Abraham Eberhorst on the test rig was astonishing from the very beginning. The maximum engine speed of 4,500 revs per minute was remarkably low for a racing car even at that time. It developed close to 300 horsepower and reached its maximum torque at just 2,700 revs per minute. In his contract with Auto Union, Porsche had agreed to the acceptance condition that the car had to drive 10 laps of the Avus racing circuit and reach a speed of at least 250 kilometers per hour on each straight. The first test drives took place in autumn of that same year on the Nürburgring racing circuit, and on the 6th of March 1934, a mere 364 calendar days after work had started, Stuck drove the agreed 10 laps of the Aarhus circuit and set a world record of 217.110 kilometers in 1 hour. In order to set this record, he had to drive at a maximum speed of 270 kilometers per hour on the straights. In addition to Hans Stuck, the first Auto Union racing team included August Momberger, Prinz Leiningen, and as reserve driver Wilhelm Sebastian. In 1934, the Auto Union car took part in over a dozen races in Germany and Europe, including a race at the Aarhus circuit in Berlin for the first time. Hans Stuck, who held the lead for a long time, eventually had to retire. A few days later, the water pump broke down in Montlery. German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring racing circuit, Hans Stuck at last took his chance brilliantly. With start number 1, his car was the first to cross the finishing line after 500 kilometers over the twisty and hilly circuit. A loud cheer went up when Stuck took the checkered flag as the race winner. The leading drivers, racing manager Walb and designer Porsche, had every reason to be proud of the first year of racing. Stuck won 3 Grand Prix and became German road racing champion and German hill climbing champion. More than 20 years after these unforgettable events in motorsport history, Hans Stuck and the female aviator Elli Beinhorn met each other again at the German Museum. One of the Auto Union Silver Arrows, now a museum piece, was the focal point of their joint experiences for a long time. Memories were still fresh. Yes, I will never forget the blisters from the juddering steering wheel. I can still feel them on my hands today when I dream about it, and the scorched feet from the hot brake pedal. It was not always easy to keep this rear-engine speedster under control. Years later, in 1981, another person from the team of select drivers had an opportunity for a rendezvous with his own past. Following a complete restoration of the museum racing car, Paul Pietsch was offered a chance to drive a lap of honor. Nothing had changed in the totally unconventional racing car from his days as a driver.
Das war genau der springende Punkt.
This was the crucial point, because up until then we had only driven racing cars with front-mounted engines. This was then something completely new at Auto Union, because suddenly you sat almost right at the front. You had a front section that was perhaps 60 to 80 centimeters long. The front wheels were directly next to you, and behind you there was an enormous 16-cylinder engine. All you could do was to feel the car's position, and if you weren't careful it began to drift at the rear, and then it wasn't long before it started to spin. Then it became a little riskier, and that took a lot of getting used to. But that was Bernd Rosemeyer's great advantage. He had never driven another racing car before. When he went over to the Auto Union car, he got to know it very quickly, in fact much faster than anyone who had ever driven a front-engine car. In 1934, Bernd Rosemeyer had secured a place in the works team together with Paul Pietsch after test drives. He only drove the Auto Union racing car for another 3 years. Rosemeyer made his debut at the Aarhus race in 1935. He chalked up his first victory at the end of the same season in Brünn. In the second season, the team comprised Rosemeyer and Stuck, as well as the newcomer Paul Pietsch and the experienced driver Achille Varzi. The cars were also improved constantly. For example, the A model, which still had a rigid rear axle and transversal leaf springs, became the B model, fitted with a new rear axle and torsion bar springs designed especially by Porsche. The C model, brought out in 1936, developed 520 horsepower from a 6-litre engine. '36 was without doubt the most successful year for Auto Union. The team-up between Auto Union and Bernd Rosemeyer proved unbeatable. During the international Eifel race, the Nürburgring racing circuit showed the vagaries of the weather. Right from the start, the race developed into a head-to-head struggle between Bernd Rosemeyer and Tazio Nuvolari. The world-class Italian driver, driving an Alfa Romeo, had built up an 8-second lead by lap 5. However, Rosemeyer closed the gap steadily and was just a few meters behind Nuvolari at the pits on the 6th lap. Rosemeyer then took the lead on the back straight, much to the delight of the spectators. A few minutes later, thick fog blanketed most of the course and reduced visibility to little more than 50 meters. Bernd Rosemeyer was the only driver in the field who continued lapping at almost the same speed as before, when visibility was good. He finally won the race 2 minutes 13 seconds ahead of Nuvolari. Rosemeyer's victory meant a great deal, but Nuvolari was still regarded by insiders at the time as one of the best drivers ever. He was also considered to be one of the most sporting drivers because after young Rosemeyer gained victory, Nuvolari expressed genuine joy at his success. The female aviator Ellie Beinhorn, who was attached to Bernd Rosemeyer since their first encounter at the Brünn Grand Prix in 1935, and his companion at the races, looks back to that era.
Das war eine ganz besondere Freundschaft. Die beiden, der Nuvolari,
the friendship between the two men was very special. Nuvolari was, if you like, one of the fairest competitors. When he realized that the other driver was quicker, he signaled to let him pass. And although both of them could only talk to each other in broken terms because of language difficulties, they were always very friendly to each other. The German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring in 1936. Motorsport had become a major attraction. Several 100,000 people flocked to the Nürburgring racing circuit whenever a race was held. The smell of car fuel and hot tires, the sporting competitions, and the sound of supercharged engines sent the spectators into raptures. Preparations for the race. The mechanics go about their work with their usual degree of diligence. In addition to the great public idols, the starting lineup include Achille Varzi and the newcomers Rudolf Hasser and Ernst von Delius. Final fingertip tests to see whether all 16 cylinders work. And they're off. And again, Bernd Rosemeyer shows his fans that he is in top form. third lap, he is timed at 9 minutes, 56 seconds. He's therefore the first driver to break the elusive 10-minute barrier for the Nürburgring North Loop. The race ended with a double triumph for Auto Union when Rosemeyer took first place and Stuck was runner-up. 4 out of the first 6 cars across the finishing line were silver arrows built in Zwickau. It didn't take long to find out why Bernd Rosemeyer was in such a good mood. Only a few days before the race, he had married Ellie Beinholm. This success was surpassed in the Swiss Grand Prix when Auto Union drivers Bernd Rosemeyer, Achille Varzi and Hans Stuck filled the first 3 places. Only 5 cars finished the race and 4 of them were from the Auto Union team. In addition to the above-mentioned drivers, the Auto Union team included the following drivers in 36-37. Ernst von Delius, who was killed during the German Grand Prix in 1937. Rudolf Hasse, who, like Delius, had been successful in the past as a sports car driver. And Hermann Paul Müller, who, like Rosemeyer, had taken part in motorcycle races. The Auto Union team even took part in 2 races in South Africa in 1937, with the understandable aim of promoting export interests. The event was organized as a handicap race. Delius and Rosemeyer had to start at the very back of the grid because the organizers assumed that they were better than the other drivers. In spite of the oppressive heat and a course that was anything but kind to tyres, Auto Union was still able to celebrate a double triumph in Cape Town. This victory was to be the highlight of Ernst von Delius' racing career.
Na schön, das ist schön.
The new steep curve was completed at the Avus racing circuit in Berlin, and Auto Union geared itself up for new challenges, which Bernd Rosemeyer accepted in his usual relaxed manner.
Kommt ein zurück, geht der
Satz von dem Kleinen.
Jetzt fällt er uns auch wieder in.
Enorm, ne?
Rosemeyer startet.
The non-Formula Avus race was held in Berlin at the start of the 1937 racing season. Auto Union took part in this race with a car body that had been developed in a wind tunnel. The final shape of the car body commanded admiration everywhere. An interesting point is that the car had pneumatic suspension, even at that time. The cars were very fast, but also very heavy with a weight of over 1,100 kilograms. The tyres, therefore, became the weak point, and they had to be changed more than usual. The race was won by the Daimler-Benz driver Hermann Lang, by the narrowest of margins ahead of the three Auto Union cars. Ernst von Delius successfully finished runner-up in a standard single-seater racing car. Hans Stuck travelled overseas on a special mission. He was to advertise German technology by taking part in the Rio Grand Prix on the 6th of June 1937. It was pouring with rain when the race began, and Stuck led unchallenged until he stopped at the pits to refuel as a precaution. However, this pit stop cost him the race, which was won by Pintacuda.
Achtung, Achtung! Wir starten zum Ziel! Start zum Reiferennen 1937! 15 Wagen am Start auf dem Nürburgring.
The International Eiffel Race was again a foregone conclusion for Bernd Rosemeyer. According to the original soundtrack of newsreel excerpts, the mechanics who carried out their work in record time also played a major role in these successes. In the first year of racing, it took 1.5 minutes to change all 4 tires and to fill the tank with 200
Aber
liters
stellt
of
den
fuel.
Motor nicht ab. Nach 25 Sekunden weiter.
Thanks to all-year-round training and maximum concentration, they performed the same task in 25 seconds during the 1937 Eiffel Race. This was an all-time record. The thunderous applause from the grandstands was a just reward for this outstanding achievement. On the 5th of July 1937, German racing cars took part in the race for the Vanderbilt Cup near New York for the first time. Bernd Rosemeyer won this race after a very hard struggle. His hands, which were frequently covered with blisters as a result of the juddering steering wheel, were an indication of just how high the physical demands were on drivers at that time. His laughter and the triumphant gesture with which he accepted the cup are nowadays still the typical pose of a radiant victor. Up-and-coming drivers also made good use of their opportunities at Auto Union. Hassan won his first Grand Prix in Belgium on the 11th of July. While some of his rivals had spectacular crashes, he finished ahead of old hands like Stuck and Lang.
Und erreicht mit einem Renndurchschnitt von über 167 Stundenkilometern das Ziel.
Of course, he was highly delighted with his victory.
Der Nachwuchsfahrer der Auto Union. Sein erster Sieg und gleich ein großer Preis.
Absolutely great, Freddie. 1-0 to you. No, 10-0, or even more.
Wie war's denn?
Oh, right.
Das war
What was
eine
it like?
fabelhafte Sache. Als ich
Ah,
das
it was
rauschte.
great, the way I shot off
Ich wollte
in
eigentlich gar nicht
front,
dran
especially
sitzen.
when it didn't even occur to me I might win.
Aber als ich dann in der
But
zweiten
after the
Halbzeit
halfway
merkte,
mark, when I
reicht
realized I had it in the
noch mehr
can,
drauf
I gave it a bit
getan.
more and drove home with my
Könnte
first
sozusagen
big
meinen
prize.
ersten großen Preis nach Hause fahren.
You bet,
Und wenn sie bald
and I'm
wieder
sure there'll be
nachfahren,
more of
wenn es
them.
nochmal so klappt, dann
Nothing
bin ich
against
dabei.
that. The mid-engined Auto Union cars were unbeatable in hill climbing races. For example, the Kesselberg hill climbing race, where the racing car from the German Museum was presented to an interested audience on the occasion of an anniversary celebration in 1992. The German hill climbing Grand Prix at Schauinsland was the other race in which the fans of the racing drivers were mainly adolescents. In 1937, the cars had twin wheels on the rear axles to transfer more power to the road. Stuck proved once again that his nickname, King of the Mountains, was justified. Rosemeyer finished as runner-up. It was the fourth victory in a row on the same track for Auto Union. The road over the Alps was far more difficult. Here is the Auto Union team on the road to Pescara. The battles with its main rival Mercedes-Benz had become more intense. The racing cars from Untertürkheim now had more power and stamina, but Auto Union had not forgotten how to win. At the Coppa Acerbo, Auto Union cars alone filled 3 of the first 4 places. The race was won by Bernd Rosenmeier, followed by H.P. Müller and Luigi Fagioli. Bernd Rosenmeier described an exciting incident.
Na, Sie haben uns ja einen schönen Schrecken eingejagt. Es war ja ein doller Zwischenfall.
We've just heard how your back wheel rolled into the pits 30 seconds before you drove in on 3 wheels. How did you manage to steer your car the last 250 meters without any mishap?
Ja, was heißt jetzt 250 Meter? Das war schon 2 Kilometer vorher passiert. Da habe ich nicht quer gestanden.
It happened already 2 kilometers back.
Dann hat die Radkappe so einen unglücklichen
I was
Schlag
suddenly
bekommen,
lying
dass
across the road
in der entgegengesetzten Drehrichtung
because a
abgeflogen
wheel
ist.
had blocked,
Das habe ich schon immer darauf gelauert, dass sie
and I
das Rad
skidded back
selbstständig
onto a
macht.
stone.
Jetzt bin ich schon die 2 Kilometer bis zum Notdepot. Ich wusste, dass das 2 Kilometer waren, ungefähr. Und da bin ich immer schon vorsichtig gefahren, immer auf Druck.
Well, the
Und
wheel
das Rad
cap
nicht
got such a
selbstständig
nasty
gemacht. Das
knock,
hat immer schon so
it
geschlagen.
flew off in the opposite
Dann,
direction.
wie ich dann beim Notdepot schon bitten sah, dann hat sich
When I finally saw the pit in front of me, the wheel decided to do it on its own,
Und schon stand ich gleich quer und ich
even
habe ihn
although I
gleich
drove very
abgefangen.
carefully.
Wie man so, wie ich das gemacht habe, weiß ich auch nicht. Das macht man ganz instinktiv. Und dann
So then I had to drive the last 300 meters on the brake drum. Wasn't it terribly difficult to get the car back on the road again? Well, I had a go at it too, and then it went as quick as lightning. Anyway, I had a rocket behind me. Caracciola was getting closer and closer.
Weil der Caracciola doch hinter mir war.
In October 1937, a race in the large automobile class was held for the first time at the Donington racing track. The circuit was treacherous. The race was the last to be held using the 750-kilogram formula, and it was the last victory for Bernd Rosemeyer, who again beat all the opposition. It was certainly worth losing a pair of trousers to gain this triumph. The surviving documents of the Auto Union Racing Department are kept in the Saxony State Archives in Dresden. The transport historian, Professor Dr. Peter Kirschberg, has studied these documents for many years and knows more about them than anybody else.
Die Erfolgsbilanz der Auto-Union in der Zeit der 750 Kilo
The
Formel,
success of Auto
also
Union
zwischen
in the era of the
1934 und
750-kilogram formula,
1937, war in der
that is
Tat
between
beeindruckend.
1934 and
Ein
37,
Tableau,
was
das
actually very impressive.
Eberhorst darüber
A
anfertigte,
series of charts drawn
gibt
by
Auskunft
Eberan
über die
Eberhorst shows the
Platzierung der deutschen
placings of German
Rennwagen in
racing
dieser
cars
Zeit.
during this period.
Grün
He
hatte
chose
als
the color
Farbe
green
für
for
Daimler-Benz
Daimler-Benz
gewählt und Rot
and red for
als
Auto
die für
Union.
die Auto-Union. Das qualitative Verhältnis zwischen
In terms
beiden
of quality,
Konkurrenten kann man
the
mit
relationship
Recht
between the
sicher
two
als
rivals can
ausgeglichen
rightly be
betrachten.
regarded as balanced.
Quantitativ gesehen aber ergibt
However,
sich
when it
deutlich
comes to
messbar ein
quantity,
Vorsprung für die
it's
Auto-Union.
obvious that Auto Union is well ahead.
Während bei den großen Preisen noch die
Whereas the
Schwaben
Swabians
mit
were still in
12
front
Siegen
with
gegenüber
12 victories
7
in
der
Grand
Sachsen die
Prix,
Nase vorn hatten,
compared to 7 by the
war
team
die
from Saxony,
Bilanz bei den
the picture was
Rundstreckenrennen
reversed in circuit races.
umgekehrt. 12 Siege der
Auto
Auto-Union
Union notched up 12
und 10
victories
Siege
and Mercedes-Benz
der
10.
Mercedes-Benz-Leute werden ausgewiesen. Ganz eindeutig
The situation was clear-cut in hill climbing races. 13 victories by Auto Union as against 1 for Daimler-Benz.
gegenüber. Ganz sicher haben die
The race
Rennerfolge den
successes
Absatz
clearly
gelegt.
boosted sales. In
1938
1938, 1 out of
jedes
every 4
vierte in
vehicles
Deutschland
registered in
neu
Germany carried the 4
zugelassene
rings on the
Kraftfahrzeug,
radiator
die
grille.
4 Ringe am
This had
Kühler.
made Auto Union
Und
one
die
of the largest
Auto-Union war
vehicle
damit
groups in
zu
Germany.
einem der größten Kraftfahrzeugkonzerne Deutschlands geworden.
The record-breaking runs, which were very popular and had strong public appeal at the time, are a special chapter in themselves. During these years of automobile growth and maturation, record attempts were not only spectacular events, although the advertising effect was enormous, but also a prime opportunity to test a car's limits under real driving conditions, since there were hardly any facilities at that time for simulating these conditions. After his record-breaking run in March 1934, Stuck set further records, in particular in February 1935, near the Italian town of Lucca. In October 1937, a record-breaking week was held for the first time. Auto Union was extremely well prepared, and the week turned out to be a great success for the company. During the week, Rosemeyer was the first driver to exceed the 400 km/h barrier on a normal road. The streamlined body developed by Iberan and Porsche's aerodynamics experts made a major contribution towards achieving such a high speed. The record set by Rosemeyer over 1 kilometre from a standing start was even more remarkable from a technical point of view, since it depended on maximum acceleration and thus primarily on the intuition of the driver in using the accelerator and knowing when to change gear. Auto Union was also represented at Mercedes-Benz next record-breaking attempts on the 28th of January 1938.
Ist bei neuen Rekordversuchen auf der Frankfurter Autobahn tödlich verunglückt.
After the record-breaking run of 432 km/h by Caracciola in the morning, it was Rosemeyer's turn on the test track. Mathematically speaking, his car was capable of reaching a speed of 440 km/h, and in fact, he was 1 km/h faster than his rival on the outward run.
Von dieser Fahrt
However, on the return run, his car left the track and turned over, killing Bernd Rosemeyer instantly. After that, Auto Union never again took part in record-breaking runs. The D model was unveiled for the first time before the home public at the German Grand Prix on the 27th of July 1938. After the death of Rosemeyer, the Italian Tazio Nuvolari was signed up for the team. The opposition comprised a well-known phalanx of Mercedes drivers, Manfred von Brauchitsch, Rudolf Caracciola, Hermann Lang and the young Englishman Dick Seaman. The Auto Union team was again completed by Hans Stuck, Rudolf Hasser and H.P. Moore.
Der große Zweikampf ist entbrannt. Über 500 Kilometer, 22 Runden, 22 Mal sind die 174 Kurven des Nürburgringes zu durchfahren.
It was plain to see that Auto Union had fallen behind its competitors because work on developing a new car had started too late in Zwickau. Stuck and Volari finished this race third and fourth, but they had no bearing on the final outcome.
Müller übergibt seinen Wagen an Nuvolari, der mit gespannten Kräften auf den Einsatz wartet. Hans Stuck hält. Der Neubauer reißt von Brauchitsch geistesgegenwärtig aus dem Wagen. Seaman fährt um die Brandstelle herum, wieder ins Rennen. Die Ereignisse und Zwischenfälle jagen einander in den letzten Runden. Bäume, der gut gefahren ist, muss aufgeben. Ferrari, der an dritter Stelle lag, der Seaman entlang, muss kurz vor Schluss noch einmal halten. Hans Stuck ist jetzt an dritter Stelle. Seaman, der junge Engländer, siegt in einem dramatischen Rennen. Es ist sein erster großer Erfolg auf Mercedes-Benz. Hermann Lang, der Tripoli-Sieger, ist Zweiter. Hans Stuck hat den Auto-Union-Wagen auf einen ehrenvollen dritten Platz gebracht.
In 1938, a new formula was introduced. For the first time, there were separate classes for supercharged and naturally aspirated engines. Since the contract with Porsche had not been renewed at the end of 1937, Eberan Eberhorst was now responsible for design work. He designed a 12-cylinder engine whose blocks were aligned at an angle of 60 degrees. 3 camshafts, in contrast to only one in the past, were now used for valve control. This made the engine more complex but increased its speed. The 3-litre supercharged-engined car weighed 850 kilograms, excluding water, oil, fuel and the driver. A striking new feature of the chassis was the rear axle. The car now had a so-called de Dion axle, which combined a rigid axle tube with 2 drive shafts. The fuel tank was no longer situated at the rear, but positioned by the side of the driver. This reduced the size of the car by 17 centimeters, and the driver no longer had to sit so far forward, but more in the center of the car. In the course of the season, the Auto Union team once again demonstrated that rare ability of making something out of a seemingly hopeless situation and fighting its way to the front. After the death of Bernd Rosemeyer, all hopes rested on the Italian champion driver Tazio Nuvolari. During the Swiss Grand Prix in the previous year, he was to contest a race for the Auto Union team, but then sportingly handed over his car to Rosemeyer when the latter had to drop out for technical problems. We must thank the former European Kodak representative, George Monkhouse, for this rare original colour film. In autumn, Tazio Nuvolari won the Italian Grand Prix in Monza and the race in Donington for the 4 rings. Race, which was held on the almost unchanged, bumpy, twisty circuit, did not pass without incident when one of the competitors lost some oil. It turned out to be Tazio Nuvolari's day. He took the lead after it had changed several times in the race, and he held the number 1 spot impressively right to the checkered flag without being challenged. In the last year of racing, 1939, the team was strengthened by 2 up-and-coming drivers. Ulrich Bigalke, who until then had accompanied Auto Union during its race with a cinefilm camera and who was responsible for many of these eventful visual shots, and Schorsch Meyer, one of the most popular motorcycle racers in Germany at that time. I think Auto Union tested 8 or 10 drivers at the Nürburgring racing circuit over a period of a few months. I remember the date exactly. It was November the 8th, 1938, when I drove a racing car for the first time at the Nürburgring. We took our overall times, split times, etc. I was the fastest of all the new drivers, and Auto Union said that I was the man for their team. Although my racing car was on fire, they pulled me out. But I soon got back in again, and I had burns everywhere, but I still managed to finish in second place. Auto Union once again staked its claim to the role of victor with a double triumph at the French Grand Prix in Brown, where Meyer finished runner-up behind H.P. Miller. Here is one of the few examples of the D model in the United Kingdom which survived the turmoil of the times. The model represents the last development stage of the now legendary racing car. The engine power was increased once again for the 1939 season. It had a double supercharger for even better cylinder charging, as well as an anti-friction bearing crankshaft. The result was an increase in engine power to approximately 500 horsepower, which almost represented the level at which engines with double the capacity had reached their power limits barely 2 years before. Equipped with these innovations, Tazio Nuvolari turned the final race by supercharged racing cars on the 3rd of September 1939 into a victory for Auto Union. This was the last race in which the Silver Arrows took part. From that day on, they became part of history.
Das Renngeschehen von damals
The
ist
races of that
Vergangenheit.
period are now history,
Aber es ist für
but they
uns
still
auch
represent
eine wichtige
important
Erinnerung
memories for us
und
and are actually
eigentlich
much more
weit
than a
mehr
legend.
als eine Legende. Im Museum kann man die
In the
Rennwagen
museum,
von damals
visitors
als
can admire the
Beispiele
racing
für
cars from that
Meisterwerke
period
der
as
Wissenschaft und
masterpieces
Technik
of science
bewundern.
and technology.
Aber darin eingeschlossen ist auch unsere Achtung vor den Menschen,
However,
die
the
diese
people who designed,
Meisterwerke ersannen,
built and drove
die
these
sie bauten
masterpieces
und
also
die sie
deserve
fuhren.
our respect.
Auch sie vollbrachten diese
They
Spitzenleistung.
also accomplished these outstanding
Beides gehört
exploits.
zusammen. Das ist heute nicht anders.
Both
Und
belong
so sind
together,
die Wagen unversehens
and this
zum
is still
Denkmal
true
geworden.
today.
Und zwar zu
These
solchen,
cars have
die
therefore
ihren
become
Zauber bewahrt
memorials,
haben,
which have kept
den
their
man
charm,
besonders dann spürt, wenn sie sich
especially
wieder auf
when
der
you see them
Straße
on the road
bewegen
again,
und
producing
dabei
that
jenen Sound
surprisingly
hören
rich,
lassen, der in
throaty
überraschend
sound
dunkler,
which
aber
generates
kerniger
excitement just like in the
Tonlage
past.
wie damals Erregung vermittelt.
The son takes over from his father, who contributed to the glorious years of the Four Rings by sporting victories. In 1990, Audi returned to the German racing circuits, which have a long tradition. Hans-Joachim Stuck won the German Touring Car Championship in 1990 in an Audi V8 Quattro, whilst Frank Bieler was the winner in 1991. He therefore followed on from the legendary successes of Hans Stuck and Bernd Rosemeyer in the Auto Union racing cars. It's just been brought home to me even more what heroes these past drivers were. The cars had no power steering, no power-assisted brakes, precarious road holding, and an unbelievable amount of power. At times, the drivers couldn't drive flat out until third gear, as a result of the poor tyres on the car and due to the lack of safety precautions, roll bars, and proper helmets. Moreover, there were no doctors, cooling jackets, or mineral drinks, but the drivers still covered distances of 500 kilometers on the Nürburgring. But it's impossible to make comparisons, just like you can't land a jumbo jet on a grass landing strip today. The advances that were made then were enormous. My father must surely have thought at that time that they couldn't make much more progress. Although we still think the same way today, progress will continue to be made. In 1992, 53 years after the last victory by the Auto Union Silver Arrows, the Audi V8 Quattro once again appear in their silver livery. They combine the continuity and tradition of a great motorsport history in the symbol of the Four Rings.